Welcome to SHOWstudio. It's Paris Fashion Week and we're talking about Saint Laurent, which I believe is already trending on Twitter. Such is the discussion that is caused by Eddie Slimane and Saint Laurent. I've got a great set of panellists with me to help add to that discussion and debate, but before we kick things off, I'll let you guys introduce yourselves, starting with you, Frances.
Okay. Frances Corner, head of the London College of Fashion.
I'm Katherine Ormerod, Senior Fashion News and Features Editor at Grazia magazine.
I'm Rebecca Gonsalves, Deputy Fashion Editor at The Independent.
Congrats on the new job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Did you find it weird saying it?
Yeah, I was like, don't choke, don't say the wrong thing.
So, right, as I said, Saint Laurent is trending on Twitter already.
What does that even mean these days?
But why does it cause so much discussion? What is that?
I mean, I think obviously because there's been so many high-profile media brouhaha, conversations around it right from the first moment that Eddie Slimane came in. I think that people are engaged with the story, so I think season on season, number one, people are buying it. Number two, they love the legend of Yves Saint Laurent and the films. Number three, there's something to write about. So I think those are three reasons why people are so engaged with it on social media.
It's interesting that you said, what does that even mean? Because do you think there's a bit of a disconnect between all this kind of hype in the fashion press, all these open letters to this and that, and the actual person that's going in and buying it?
I think so. I think that he knows what his customer wants and can give it to them quite easily. And he might get involved in a few little spats, but I don't think he necessarily cares. And I think he probably quite enjoys playing this kind of character of a pantomime villain where he's lambasted in the press, but he is, doing what he wants and what he believes in, and he doesn't care, and he has his artistic products, and he's moved the studio to LA, and he's got it in the palm of his hand, so I don't think he really cares. But I think he adds, it's like going, oh, look behind you, or whatever it is, boo.
It is, but it's not like he's just ignoring it. He's
no,
engaging
he's ramping
with
it up.
But do you think he's, because I think at first everyone was like, oh, he can't take any criticism, but I wonder if there was an element of kind of adding fuel to the fire, and now it's become...
I think it was all about positioning. I mean, I think he knew exactly what he was going to do. He obviously had complete backing from the company and from Kering to sort of reposition it in that way. Everybody knew, taking the name like, Yves Saint Laurent and doing what he was doing. And I think also he's had a very clear vision again for the sorts of clothes and the sort of product that he wants to sell. He knows, as you were saying, what his market is. And I think he's very, very clever.
But there's definitely some ego at play here.
Oh, definitely.
No, just a misunderstood clever guy.
But I
think there are lots of people who aim to do that and don't. So I mean, you can't do. I mean, you couldn't do what you did unless you have a massive ego. I mean, you just couldn't, because when people think, "My God, I can't play with the name and do all of this," but obviously it was irrelevant to him in that respect.
That's exactly what I was going to ask, is why has it been so successful? Because there have been people in fashion with huge egos, there have been people in fashion who've tried to rebrand stuff. Does it just boil down to how easy the pieces are? Because when you actually look at them in a shop, they are so kind of like...
covetable.
Yeah, really, really covetable. Is that the root, or is it all the brand hype? What's selling Saint Laurent when you walk into like the Sloane Street store, when you go into Selfridges or wherever you are?
I don't think it's just the product. Because you could argue that for all sorts of, depending on what your taste is and your aesthetic, they're well-made, beautiful gut, but then, so are a lot of, I think it's something else. You're buying this other thing that he's wanting, this, what do you call it, aspiration, or I want to look like that, or I want to be that woman.
It's a lifestyle.
But,
it's a lifestyle. It's totally
he
a lifestyle.
completely embodies himself, but also, if it was, a really bourgeois, feminine, or something collection, and he was this kind of sticking his fingers up at the industry, it wouldn't work. But he's selling this rock and roll spirit that he lives, perhaps a little too much in the public eye sometimes, but people are aspiring to not just those clothes but that lifestyle.
What does that say about kind of society and what we want? Because I was kind of eavesdropping on you guys before, and you were having this conversation before we went live about firstly kind of the millennial generation, this like thirst for fame and this idea of kind of like being sold a dream, and people have these crazy aspirations. Does it all tie into that sense of kind of celebrity and fame, coolness?
For sure. And I think that Eddie Slimaine's been very smart. He's picked up that LA Instagram girl, and he can dress her perfectly, and you know, people have got that tuning into their feeds every single morning when they wake up, and it's literally everything you need to be that girl. The biker boot, the perfect leather jacket, you know, the throwaway t-shirt, all of that stuff, it's all there, and it's all in the collection season after season.
And what's made that girl so, you know, are we scared that people now, what they want when they buy high fashion is cool? They don't want cut, they don't want longevity, they just want cool. Is cool like the ultimate luxury now?
I don't know. I think it's always been around. I think it's just done on a different scale now. I think if you look back to people in the 60s who would buy, you know, like the mods in their mohair suits and their bum freezers and, you know, Doc Martens, whatever they specifically wore, there was something there's always been something tribal about fashion, and this is just it on a luxury scale.
Yes, and also on a democratic scale, you know, the way that fashion is now, as you say, on a scale so much broader, it's accessible for so many more people around the world.
I think it has a really, I think one of the things I think has been very clever is he has, for me, I mean, I don't know, but he has a sort of mix between a sort of chic Parisian with a LA or America laid back. And it's somehow, it's not, you know, it's that combination of the two that he gives a sort of sophistication to it. So it's not totally sort of laid back, and but it has this sort of sense of, you know, the sort of pared down, quite simple on one level, but also great sense of colour and
well, yeah, because
things
when you
like
think
that
about who's buying it, it is an older shopper, and they,
it is,
they need pieces that aren't so kind of falling off and
exactly,
Although it's always interesting to see his casting and who's on the front row and all of that stuff.
Kind of those kids, isn't it?
It is, but as we were talking about the Sonia Rykiel collection before, we're like, who is this girl? Like, he knows exactly who his girl is. She's sitting there, it's Sky Ferreira, it's Lanny Hemingway, it's all the girls that are. He knows exactly who he's engaging with.
But what does it say about kind of fashion that, because often we sit here on these panels and we say, you know, that this is really silly to target something in such a useful way because the people that buy fashion are older women, but what I find really interesting about it is a lot of brands that do kind of target themselves too young really fail because of it. And he hasn't. He's all about this stick-thin 17-year-old girl, but yet he's selling so well. He's not selling to those girls. You know, those girls don't have that money.
But he's selling to the women who were those girls once. And there's a sense of nostalgia in it. And also, you know, there's also the women who wish they had been that girl.
But also, I think it's really, I mean, if you think about it, you know, what does age mean right now? A lot of, they were those girls, but they're also, they might be 30, 40, 50-something women who, you know, really want to look like that. They haven't really changed. They're still the same person, and you've got that sort of mother-daughter or whatever relationship. I mean, what is the difference sometimes between? I think there isn't.
Generations are so much more fluid. You only have to look at Anna de la Russo. She's wearing it head to toe. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a consumer out there who's going to be 17 forever, and they're fighting the good fight. You know, it is that. That's what it is. It's eternal youth, isn't it?
Do you notice that a lot when you're putting together the fashion pages for the Indie or for Grazia? This sense of, because I think there was a real time in fashion writing for women where there was a big focus on this for your age, this for your age. Has that gone completely now?
From as far as we work, we would never ever say this is for this age group, this is for that age group, because it's not realistic and it's also patronising.
It's so patronising, it's so prescriptive.
And if you want to wear plaits in your hair and look like the Mark by Mark girl, go for it. Like, who's to say that you're too old?
And do you think that real women are genuinely responding to that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, people in the 40s and 50s shop in Topshop now, and that would have been pretty much unheard of 15 years ago.
And what's been the catalyst for that, do you think?
I mean, from my experience, it's obviously, you know, you had the 60s where you've got all the baby boomers and they believe that they've got access to everything and freedom to be whoever they want to be, and by the time they've got into their 50s, 60s, 70s, they're not interested in conforming to any prescribed idea of the way they should dress or who they should be. So it's just that mentality coming through, I think, and you know, within these generations.
Yeah, I think the sort of celebrity culture, actors, actresses, musicians have had a big influence on that, because, you know, if you are Madonna, so you're mid-50s, actually, you know, and dressing and acting in the way, and then in a way that does influence, or Debbie Harry.
That's really interesting, because we tend to presume that celebrity culture really affects kind of a really youthful generation. You know, people always talk about the negative effects it's having on a young generation, but you actually it's so pervasive.
If you think about Grazia, it's, you know, Jennifer Aniston, it's you know, Angelina Jolie. These are women in their late 30s and early 40s. They're not young, you know, they're in the middle of their lives.
So why is fashion still not really picking up on that? You know, why aren't we seeing, because this Eddie Simone and Saint Laurent definitely does still fetishize youth. You know, you're not seeing those great women that we're talking about on his front row, even if they once did live that lifestyle, even if they still live it. He's not championing them, he is championing the young women. Is that just because, you know, we've been thinking a lot on these panels about kind of what luxury is, and we talk a lot about luxury being coolness and things that are even more elusive than expensive clothes, because that doesn't feel that elusive anymore. So is just youth become a part of that, where it's just something unattainable, so fashion kind of needs to hold on to that, because fashion's not that exclusive anymore. Do you know what I mean? Like, it feels very democratic, whereas youth is.
I always think it's really ironic at times. So you get a lot of the designers of 60 plus designing for a market that is 20 something or younger, you know, and it's like we have, and there is I think there are some aspects of it where it has caught up, and they're beginning to understand that a lot of the people who buy it are older, but it's not what it could be, I don't think.
And some people, of course, onto it. I really noticed that a fair amount with certain designers, especially in London. You saw it, like Mary Katranzo was doing it very well with her casting. But I just wonder why we're not seeing it more. It's this kind of weird thing. It feels like if you're saying, you know, like, with such kind of enthusiasm, how, you know, Grazia would never be kind of so pigeonholed with age. Why are we still seeing it on a runway? Because it's not even the case that you can only get that body on a young girl.
Yeah, of course. But I think that social media is changing that totally, because the mummy bloggers, the women in their 40s, girls like Caroline de Magre, as I was saying, they have huge following, and people are engaged with their lifestyle in a very different way. Like, you know, they're not just a face, it's what they're cooking, what they do in the weekend. You know, it's a much more rounded picture of people and that's what women in the middle of their lives are engaging with in a way that maybe youth doesn't. So I think that obviously brands are working with them. You can see that they're working with them on social media. They're maybe not there on the, you know, flagship show day.
I think also you've got the advertisers and the PR. It's not just about the designer, and I think a lot of them are really concerned about what the positioning is like, and they're sort of scared if you're going to perhaps introduce the idea of this is relevant for the 30 plus, whereas they don't want to do that. They think it's too risky. So I think there are a number of factors in play.
That's interesting. Yeah,
but
it's a complex one, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
There has been a return over the last few seasons to the older models who were you know, at the Lanvin show, Amber Valletta and
with
Naomi,
an undercut, amazing.
And then Naomi was at Diane. And it's like, you know, they're pretty expensive for one thing. They're not going to do a whole season of shows because you know, that's not really a feasible option. So, but they might do a campaign. It's a different way of presenting it.
That's totally true. The financial aspect, obviously the younger girls are really cheap in comparison. They are, you know, in comparison to booking someone who's had a long career in their 40s. They're going to have many more demands, you know, diva times. You know, so that is a good, you know.
I mean, that's what it is at the end of the day. Everything has to come down to the bottom line.
I want to pick up on taking things in a slightly different tack, because we always get those lovely Saint Laurent invitations, you know, the leather-bound books. And this time the artwork in it is by Robert, I think it's Heineken is how you say it. He's a photographer or artist that I actually haven't heard of, which probably is really ignorant, because it's probably super famous. And it's aspects of his work from 1963 to 1974. And the work is centered in this conversation about the materiality of the photograph and the function of image and reproduction in contemporary society, which I don't know if the intended use of that was to get us thinking about image, but it got me thinking straight away about Saint Laurent and the pervasiveness of those catwalk images and that look, and I'm just interested to get your opinion on the function of the catwalk show now, because we talk a lot on these panels as well about how it seems like catwalk imagery has almost become like the new advertising campaign, and it must be the case when you guys are putting your pages together that how those sometimes one look from a collection, it almost feels like you remember that more than you remember the campaign. Do you now start to see the show as a kind of an extension of the ad campaign? And do brands treat it like that with you? Do they say to you, like your advertisers, would they say we want this much catwalk imagery in the magazine or anything like that?
I don't think it would ever be quite like that, but for sure, you know, that's why I think that especially in, say, New York, it's such a brand jockeying moment for a catwalk. Isn't about the clothes, it's about the image, you know, and lots of shows like that. And definitely when you're looking at a show, you could identify one look which is maybe stands really quite separately from the rest of the collection, but you know, it would be a great hook visually to do a trend piece, for example. So you're not necessarily looking at the holistic picture of a whole collection, you're just looking at that one moment. And that's in the same way that has always ever been with a campaign. You know?
Yeah. Do you think it's changed the way we critique fashion shows? Because even just the pressure on journalists, I think you are there sometimes if you're reviewing and doing the social media, which we were talking about before, that horrible pressure. But it does, I guess, change it because you're looking for a picture and an understanding of a kind of a vision, but you are also looking for kind of jumpy throwaway moments. Do you think it has changed the way fashion is critiqued?
It's a visual soundbite, isn't it? I mean, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for that picture that's going to get the most likes on Instagram, the most, you know, comments.
It's the
and
equivalent
engagement.
of that quote that
it is.
you kind of twist the meaning a little bit, but it sounds great on its own.
It's a bit like the track rather than the album.
Exactly.
You know, and the fact people don't download the rest, they just want the one hit. I mean, it'd be interesting to know whether that affects sales in some particular
And I wonder
items.
it'd be interesting to know as well how conscious designers are of that, whether they do know that one look will, because we were talking about it before on the Sonia Raykel panel, because there was a look that was put on Kendall Jenner that was very sheer, very risque, I presume with the intention to go everywhere, but then you think that look will symbolise the collection. Actually it was a black sheer look, and
which was nothing
didn't
to
really
do with,
pertain to the rest of the collection. And then you think, is a designer happy with that, happy to say, yes, this will symbolise my vision for the season, even though it wasn't really my vision for the season? It's really interesting to think
it is really interesting. I mean, just sort of, you know, you think about the Givenchy and you think about, you know, Northwest being on, and the fact all, you know,
that seat
and
picture,
and also that I think you know, what she was wearing had been designed for. And so you think there's this whole, I mean, coming back to this idea, as you were saying about the whole image and the whole sort of lifestyle thing, so is that what everybody remembers that show for? As you said, it could just be the seat.
Isn't that depressing that Northwest seat number would be more Instagram probably than any fashion from that show?
But that's the thing, I think some designers are becoming really savvy about building this whole experience into a show, because what once was, you know, quite a straight thing, I mean, catwalk photographers didn't even stand at the end of the catwalk, they were up and down the side. And it's changed so much and it's become so industrialized, and even the creative side of it has become industrialized in a way. There's all these different people working to create an experience that the people who are there then share with their followers. And it's kind of all this marketing. And the clothes are just, so you'll see 5 shots from a collection and 1 or 2 might be clothes on Instagram at least.
They're just part of it.
It's just part of it. So I think the fact that I think designers definitely do think about that look, that catwalk image, especially like the way that's kind of the way Style.com has made them think about it as well. It's like that's going to be your, you know, your avatar for the season. What's it going to be? And it's, I think, changed the way they think about it.
Definitely.
But what's interesting when you're talking about the experience taking precedence over the clothes, I mean, that's obviously something that London was always known for. And, you know, from the Queen's Day, when it was all about a visceral experience that the audience was involved in, and the clothes were kind of, you know, I think then everything became very, very commercial and focused on product, and now maybe it is swinging a little bit for different reasons. Actually, in terms of it being a creative realm, maybe there's a plus point.
But I think it's swinging in an interesting way, where I think it is back to that experiential thing, but I still think there isn't much priority put on the people in the room at the show anymore, or there can be a veneer of it.
Well, they're just a conduit.
But the end game is always for them to then Instagram it for other people to see it. You know, you wouldn't. I think the kind of magical shows that people talk about, I'm often struck for the shows I don't attend, and when I ask people about the ones that they did, it's often things where there was nothing there that they could then share. It was just something that was very, very personal. So, you know, like the Marc Jacobs music with the individual headphones. Because a lot of these great experiences, like light displays or sets,
that you can't take pictures.
Do you know what I mean? They're not really.
I mean, it is really interesting because somebody, I can't remember the name of this particular designer. She's a Malaysian designer who hasn't got a shop, doesn't actually have much of a website. Everything is done through Instagram. She has something like 650,000 followers. It's it's unbelievable. So you think there are people building up a whole sort of approach to selling their business and all of those to create sorts of events.
So how easy it would be to fake a fashion show, to act like, that thing where it's like if a tree falls in the forest or something. It's the same thing, like you could just pretend that there was a fashion show by doing clever Instagrams.
It would be quite easy, really. I mean, that's maybe what
everyone was there. Don't you know it?
Great that. We should try it.
I think we should do it.
This is the next art project.
That would be good. Like that girl, we talked about this on the Polarization, that girl that pretended to go on holiday. Did you see that when she said she went... I need to stop talking about this on panels. I was like, why is she obsessed with it? This girl had to do this thing where she went on like a gap year. She went for 2 months all around Asia, and she told her whole family, and she stayed where she was, but she like faked it through images as an art project. She didn't tell anyone, and she made all these fake pictures. It was really scary.
Like Photoshop.
She Photoshop, or she went to like local kind of restaurants, like who had
the local
Thai
restaurant.
And then she kind of like went snorkeling in the swimming pool and took a picture underwater and all stuff like it was really.
But did it look realistic, or was it obviously?
It did. That was the thing. But it didn't when you looked at it. You were like, this looks so fake. But then.
But how much?
Because when you see it in the context, when you think something is there,
happened. Like, and also everything. If you think about, it's so quick. I mean, Instagram. I mean, how often do you don't really study it? Do you?
You don't.
It's just this very instant response.
And that's why people get away with doing all of that retouching, and using all those apps because, and then you're just like, oh, she's so slim, and you don't look for the types of things that you look for in media or everywhere else because you can't scrutinise it.
Have we become more forgiving of fashion designers because of it? Because I often think it was Saint Laurent, because I know. It's not like everyone knows that designers obsessively vintage shop and use vintage garments and take them apart and use the patterns, but I don't believe they do it as literally as Eddie Simone does. It does feel like he goes into a shop and like buys a great 70s jacket and literally copies it. And do you think things like Instagram have made us more forgiving of that because we take in the look rather than kind of the pieces as much? Because he does make these looks that look fantastic, and it makes you less inclined to pick apart.
I just don't think people care. I think that it's people don't care. They're not interested in the layers of references in the way that people once were.
Have you noticed that with Grazzi? If you did something on a designer's references, same with the indie, would people care, or do they just want to know who wore it?
I mean, there's always like first dibs on information. You want to be like, oh yes, he was blah blah around the fashion dinner table or whatever. But I just don't think people care in the same way. Experience it, we can.
But I think people are really cute. I mean, I agree. But then we also find that people are really interested to know how things are made. So, for example, when we had an exhibition about sort of new designers or makers within leather, and we had part of the setup at the exhibition was one of our students making shoes, for example, and it was one of the things that people absolutely and really love. They really want to know how things are made. One of the things we've been talking about is actually doing an exhibition which is all about how you construct, how you make garments and things like that. So you've got this curious sort of, it's a bit like the idea that the more music has become downloadable, the more people want to attend live events
and buy
or go to a poetry reading or all of those. So I think it's how you capitalise on that. But I think it comes back to your consumer. There are some who want that look. They want to feel it's totally styled. They want to, and then if those who are really interested in the sort of structure and construction, probably they might go and buy something from Saint Laurent, but the chances are they may go somewhere else.
I think the brands that cater to those two different kind of consumers, obviously there's lots of different consumers, but like those kind of two polarising ideas, I think they're becoming even more extreme.
They are becoming
more
extreme,
kind of like Kenzo model or the Saint Laurent model where it's literally just about surface, and then the ones that kind of obsessively become about the craft and the making.
And I would say a lot of that's in menswear. Well. I mean, that's a very specific menswear approach to luxury, isn't it? I mean, there's obviously the artisan side of womenswear, especially with accessories. But I think that it's the geekier side of fashion.
It's the geekiest.
It is. It's how do you make this?
But we've seen, and I've asked a few people on this, but it's really interesting to get your opinion writing specifically for a womenswear title, because we've seen so many men's designers in top jobs at womenswear houses like Eddie Simone, especially like Raf Simons at Dior, and I think his last collection was a real kind of testimony to that idea of like weird, geeky, obsessive detailing. And why do you think, is it just a kind of fluke that we've seen so many men in those positions, or is it something to do with that kind of sensibility?
I think for sure, you know, the idea of construction, I mean aesthetically as well, menswear has been so important in fashion over the past few years. You know, androgyny has been so pervasive that it makes sense that someone with, you know, a strong background in tailoring and menswear would then be successful in the womenswear market. Sure. So I think it's as much of an aesthetic thing potentially as actual craftsmanship.
But it's interesting when you think about, you were talking about, you know, Phoebe Philo and Celine, or you think about Miuccia Prada. So it's interesting, isn't it? Because they, you know, there's a different sort of influence going on. Because I think one of the things I love about Phoebe Philo's work is the fact that, you know, it's so pared back. It's so much about, in a way, how things are constructed, because you can't get away with that if you unless you really understand. And it's absolutely perfect, the proportions and so on. So I agree, that thing about the polarization is becoming, you know, so you, on the one hand you've got the sort of Jeremy Scott and you know and all of, you know, which in a way you can sort of put that idea of the sort of style, total look, gimmicky on one, selling the product on one side, and then on the other
I feel like people have to push their USP to like an extreme now. Do you know what I mean? It's not enough.
It's like the exclamation mark of fire, you know, of everything. But that's how we consume our media. That's Daily Mail, you know. Everything scandal. You know.
But it's scary, isn't it, when that kind of exaggeration gets to the point where you know, it's no longer the press exaggerating it, the designers are kind of exaggerating it as well. It's almost like they have to push what they think, so you know, we are about this. Or it's kind of, it gets a bit.
But it's true. It's like, you know, all the time. You know, we obviously get approached by various companies, and it's all about the new. What's new? You know, where's the pipeline? What's new? And I think that's just an extension of what's happening further up. Where again, for the design, you know, how are you promoting it, how are you going to sell it? So it's pushing all the time towards more polarization.
What I think is really interesting is what you're saying is how simplified that's been. There's no nuance.
Exactly.
It's all just top line. There's no analysis of anything. There's no subtlety to it. And I mean that's really, you know, a sad indictment really of culture today.
What's your take?
You look really sad.
I'm just going to burst into tears.
I don't know. I just think. I was walking down here, walking down Sloane Street, and walking past all the boutiques, and I was just like, "This is autumn winter. I'm so bored of it." And it's October.
It hasn't started.
It's not even October. And I just think, I mean, obviously working in the industry, I'm inundated with it much more. But as a consumer, that level is becoming almost parable. It's like, you know, I just don't know. I think it splits into two directions. I think there's some people where it's much more conceptual. It's much more about an idea of, you know, construction. The idea that they're selling is something that's going to appeal to you on more than just, you know, a shallow level or a surface level. And then there's this, I think it's a modern idea of luxury, is that it doesn't have to mean something to cost a lot of money. It can just cost a lot of money for whatever reason, and that's okay. And I think it's also understanding about where the real consumer market is and who is spending the money, because I'm sure there's a lot of companies that, like, you know, Prada probably makes a lot more money on, you know, plain black trousers than we would ever credit it. Then, you know, the 80 grand fur coats aren't going to, they might sell like 5, but, you know, and it's understanding that, but understanding that that 80 grand fur coat is going to sell, you know, 500 pairs of trousers.
Well, it's the clothes to handbag and perfume range.
It is.
Yeah, but it feels like it's got a bit out of control, doesn't it, in that sense of kind of, sometimes I wonder if it is all worth it. You know, sometimes you look at I'm just intrigued to know this, given we were talking about it before with the catwalk shows and the functioning as advertising campaign, like how they measure that, how they actually, is there a spike in sales of black trousers when there's the show, or is that not even what it's about? Is it meant to be a kind of, as that imagery continues to go?
I think that's That's what it is. They will then regram at some point something throughout their, social media channels, and then you'll see the spike. And they'll be able to read it globally. In the same way that being featured in a magazine used to have the same impact.
But it's the same way that like celebrity endorsement now is worth so much money. And even like people who you wouldn't even think people care about, like
Jennifer Garner. People, they really, really care what
they want
she
someone
wears.
that they
wouldn't think she'd be a huge person, but she sells clothes.
It's crazy.
Who else from your readers?
From our readers, Jennifer Aniston still sells a lot of clothes. People identify with her, especially those with money, i.e. women in their late 30s, 40s, so on. So it's not all Kim Kardashian, though.
And do they identify with catwalk imagery, or do you find that you try and use that less in the magazine because it's been used so much online?
I don't know. I think that it depends. As we were talking about these visual sound bites, I think that some images just become emblematic of a moment in fashion, and I think that they can be just as powerful as a celebrity, but they're probably rarer and less red carpet event. Red carpet events happen every single week. We get pictures, so there's just more of a opportunity to find those.
And I think also there's still a huge amount of prestige attached to having a catwalk show. Like people think, this is amazing. Like even on Matches Fashion or Net-a-Porter, it's like runway piece or catwalk piece. It's like there is a certain amount of cachet to it.
Do you find it with the picture desk at the Indie? Do they always lean towards like celebrity imagery over catwalk imagery?
We don't do really.
Lots of other newspapers will though.
But
so if Cara's
that's why people don't.
That's
why people don't read the Independent. Or that's why people read the Independent, because we don't do that.
But it is. You speak to lots of other newspaper editors, and they're like, "Oh, Cara's well, that's the picture they're using."
And I mean, we definitely do that with Instagram and Twitter. It's like because we understand that that's what those people who follow us, who wouldn't necessarily buy the paper, that's what they want. But then it's just
you don't want to be the paper that does that, do you? It's kind of your USP not doing that with the paper itself.
I mean, it's a conscious decision, really. Because once you start, like, where do you stop?
Can we talk, just before we go to the show, I'm keen to look at the imagery, but I want to talk about how kind of pervasive and like ubiquitous this look has become. Do you see it in the college in the way your students dress? Like, do you notice them liking Saint Laurent and wearing it? I asked this because I felt like this huge disconnect with young people when we did a student panel.
Young ones.
Because we did a student panel and I asked them about Moschino and the McDonald's collection. We did it for this season's Moschino show, so it was all students from LCF and St Martin's and University of East London, and I asked them, did you like that McDonald's collection? They were all like, yeah, it was great, it was really fun, everyone in college was wearing it. And I kind of had decided in my head that everyone hated that collection, but students, the young people, think really differently. So I'm interested, do they like Saint Laurent? Do they think it's something that's cool? Do you see the kind of girls wearing that look?
It's the whole shebang. Actually, you get every look possible. Actually, yes, you've got that, but you've also got the sort of the non-core, I mean, in fact, you've probably got more of that. People actually like, playing it down than you do, I mean, at the moment, all the students are turning up, so they tend to be like, going for the most, give it another couple of weeks. That's right. It's really difficult getting up the stairs.
But be in their pajamas next week.
No, they won't, no, exactly. So I think there is a real mix, and that's what you'd hope. And also because, I mean, the other thing that's really interesting is because we do everything that's about fashion, so footwear students or jewellery students or visual merchandise, I mean they're all completely different.
Do they can you tell the tribes, because I wonder if they're kind of the journalism and PR and
promotion
students.
Totally, you can yes, you can.
Are they more of the Saint Laurent girls?
They're more, get
that.
But then also, were they not Saint Laurent girls before he was at Saint Laurent? Because he's feeding something back. It's not like he's dictating it.
Well, I think they were with the previous. Actually, I think that, I mean, they are obviously, avid followers of fashion, and whichever way they want to pitch that.
Exactly. But really. I think you're right. It was like Saint Laurent via Zara via Saint Laurent. So it's all eating itself back and back.
I mean, the other interesting thing about the college, obviously, got a lot of international students, which is great because again, you'll get lots of different sorts of looks, not necessarily following. I mean, obviously there's a big influence on the main collections, but you get some really inventive. Again, a lot of the vintage or the mixing, much more sort of mixing.
Yeah, that's what makes me sad about it. And I wrote this in my report about the last menswear collection. Is it just makes me sad because I feel like it's taking away the passion of searching for vintage garments, because when you're kind of serving them up and selling them back so easily. And I know that we kind of had that vintage explosion where vintage was so cool and prices got so high, so it was already become a little bit. But with this, it just feels like the real death of authentic vintage. You know, this idea of kind of really digging out a great jacket, like that people would have no shame wearing one of those jackets and going, yeah, it's Saint Laurent, even though it looks so retro. It's just a bit strange, isn't it? But
it is.
It's also interesting. I love that idea that you just said about kind of how it's fed by Zara, because I feel like it's interesting in a fashion college that it's perhaps not the kind of most desired brand, but I feel like if you went to a normal university, even if they didn't know that they were channeling Saint Laurent, so many girls would have that look now, and it's almost like Saint Laurent has become more covetable because they bought the look in Zara, they associate it as a fashionable look, and then they see Saint Laurent and they're like, oh, that's a and it's kind of
like, take off your floppy hat, come on.
And like ribbons,
a ribbon and a fur coat and a skinny trouser, like, come on. You know, but you know, it sells, and that's a great thing. You know, that it's obviously funding lots of people's careers. And
do you think it will last? How long do you think it will last?
I don't know. It hasn't been going on since the 1970s.
Well, I do. I look at it and you think, but you think normally there is some sort of reaction. But I mean, I agree on one level. It has. Some people have never.
Well, I think it's
got out
too
of it,
normal to be reacted to, because it's not fashion; it is clothes. And I feel like you can't. And that's what I always found. I did find ironic when everyone got on their real high horse about it, because I'm like, it is just clothes, and it's almost like he's playing the fashion pack at that own game, because if you diss it, you're dissing clothes and you're dissing what everyone wears, because everyone wears skinny jeans, everyone wears kind of vintage boots, everyone wears sweaters and like vintage jackets and leather jackets. So he's made this really interesting conundrum where if you're kind of saying, oh, this is awful, then you are a fashion journalist who slags off what most people wear, and then it's like, what's the point of your job? That, you know,
it's also what you wear. It was awful. It was awful as a proposition from him for that brand at that time, with the attitude that came with it. But also, I think that fure's died down completely. I think at the stage it is now, you either go because you have to, or you just ignore it, and you decide to go for dinner or something else. You don't sit on the 5th row as, you know, a fashion director behind, you know, 13, 14, 17-year-old people who you don't even know who they are. Like, you know, that's the thing. People got so frustrated, and then they just thought, well, if I have to go, I have to go.
But why is it trending on Twitter then? What's fueling that?
That's the 17-year-old girls on the front row.
Do you think it is?
Maybe we don't know, but the other 17-year-olds.
Oh yeah, definitely. The 13. Well, that's the thing. I think Twitter now is probably more for teenagers than we realise. And Instagram, it's like 13, 14-year-olds.
They were saying,
and it's like they, in 10 years' time, they might be the people who can afford to buy the bag, do this, and they're building up an idea of that brand, and it's how important it is. So maybe in 10 years' time it will have a resurgence.
So maybe it won't. You know, you were saying how long it'll last. Maybe it'll last forever, because he
gets them in young. Maybe.
Like a loyalty card.
I know it is. He's like, get them when they're 7, and then they'll.
Do you know what though?
It's like a Jesuit education, doesn't it?
It's stressful.
But it isn't 10 years' time. Girls for their 16th birthday will be asked for a duffel bag without a shadow.
But how many of them are going to get them?
Well, you'd be really surprised.
Think when every girl had a Mulberry bag.
Exactly,
they all got
or
their
a Tiffany
21st
bracelet.
or 18th. There's always been that thing, the Tiffany bracelet.
Yeah, but that was, you know, like £200, like for an £800 handbag for a 16-year-old girl.
They've all got smartphones, you know.
And you think they've got that gold-plated jewellery that's like 100, 200 quid.
Yeah, like that, maybe more than a bag, or
Well, they buy into it somehow, and there's always going to be some girl at school that's got that
definitely.
Bag and hate her and love her at the same time. You know,
speaking from experience.
Clearly.
It's a bit like therapy though. Should we have a look at the shape? I'm expecting to be really surprised. I think he's going to have done some really conceptual shapes this season.
That's a hat.
Okay then.
Is this what we were expecting?
I think look number 3 was talking a bit like that Austin Powers 70s that I was talking about. That's got a real junk shop vibe to it.
It's kind of like shaft.
Look number 4 is what I thought we were going to get at Sonia Rykiel.
Yeah, exactly. That's more what I thought we were going to get, exactly.
Red lapels.
I'm really not looking forward to really cheap sheer tights everyone's wearing, and you're going to have horrible ladders in the bus.
I always think of Lady Di and Panorama, you know. I love sheer tights personally.
I just can't make them work.
I can't make them work.
But it's spring summer, he couldn't do an opaque.
He could, yeah.
I've just I think I've become numb to it. I know that sounds silly, but it's like, and maybe it is really, really smart. We talk about the pace of fashion, the desire to put out something new all the time, because this could literally be from any season of Saint Laurent. Like, you could just show me and you can't tell the pictures apart.
No, I mean, well, it seems more pared back than, I was just trying, because I had a quick look at, the last one. And it's making me think a little bit about some of the Tom Ford looks, or even the Givenchy, that sort of really sort of lot of black, quite sort of skin tight.
But that's what's really scary, isn't it? We talk about the influence on the high street, but also the huge influence on other designers that he's had is kind of really, really striking.
And there's a lot of colour in there.
There's a lot of colour,
and tricky colour as well.
And sort of block colour.
Red and green and ochre and a kind of petrol blue all together, But then, as you say, look 20, that could have been last season, season before.
But it's even not just the looks, it's the pieces, like the jackets, the sheer blouses. It's like he could literally just be pulling pieces from last season and going, just put this out.
I guess in a way he's set the 70s agenda, so why would he change his tune when everyone else has...
But that's what someone like Prada would do.
Of course.
I'd love to see him go really 90s, like really, really 90s. That would be good.
He'd probably just make it look the same as this though.
Yeah.
Not much space for boobs in this.
No boobs. No, it's very short, isn't it?
Very, very
short. Short skirts.
There are loads of things to buy there.
Yeah.
And it just
where would you wear it? That's what I don't get.
What do you mean?
Like, apart from, the skinny jeans, the leather jackets, where would you wear that number 27 look? Where would you wear that?
Head to toe it would be a challenge, but if you like jazzing it up,
people would just buy that shirt and they'd wear it.
Yeah,
the buyers they'll buy what you just said.
The skirt with an oversized sweater and an ankle boot. But you're right, like that.
But I just don't think people get that dressed up anymore.
But then you think, well, what's selling Mary Katranzi then, or what's selling Mario Schwab? People do. That's the weird thing.
Yeah, but that's a different type of dressing up as well. Like, that's a certain formality to it.
Yeah. But I think if you strip away the styling of this, a lot of it does have that formality. That's what's interesting when you see the pieces merchandised. Often they do look kind of just like a nice party dress. Because when you strip off all that grunge attitude, it's like a beaded black dress, and it is. I totally hear what you're saying. It's less gowny, less formal.
No, but I can see who would buy it in Topshop for 70 quid.
Yeah.
I can't see who would buy it in Harrods for 1700.
Then it is like the leather jackets and the stuff that's the meal ticket.
Models
with money to burn
would wear it.
I think there are people with lots of money. Who will.
Oh no, I understand that, but I just don't understand where
they're going.
Yeah. Well, is it to go clubbing? Is it to?
I think it's either be clubbing,
is it going to a music party because they work in the industry?
I remember on a previous panel we were talking about that whole thing about the London effect of all the sort of social stuff that goes on, and in a way that's why they get lots of cocktail dresses, and it's that sort of it's a grungy equivalent really. So.
And I feel like this kind of pervasive dressing down culture, I think it has probably affected high fashion, but it's affected them to push more for the dressing up, because people will buy their jeans from Uniqlo and their sweaters from Uniqlo, Sunspell, whatever. But the party wear category is still kind of like you can get a great...
It's up for grabs.
Yeah, so the
people invest in that.
They do. They invest in a party dress.
Because they want to feel confident.
Yeah. And I do think, they probably wouldn't invest, in... sweaters and jeans anymore, but which is interesting.
Again, 47. I mean, they could be Sonia Rykiel. You know what I mean? It's
45 and 46 and 47, it just looks like American Apparel. You know, those like U dresses that everyone used to wear when they're like 17.
Yeah. But when you see them, they'll obviously be the most exquisite quality and all that. Yeah.
But I don't think the quality is... People have really hammed up that the quality is impeccable. I think sometimes the embellishment is really, really great, but I don't think the quality is that amazing. You know, the hardware stains with time, you know, it doesn't stay gold. Like, the pieces aren't as... I think the beading is beautiful, but I don't think the quality is as great as everyone kind of goes on about.
What's interesting is looking at it and thinking editorially what it's going to sit in, like which big...
I was just thinking that.
But you just can't, because you have to shoot it full look, don't you?
But this, so maybe if they were doing a floral story, then it would go with Celine. I'm just trying to think where it fits in terms of being relevant.
If you think, because everything's so 70s, you could almost kind of...
But it's just done, isn't it?
But you're right, that 52
it is interesting
skirt.
to be like, where else is it going to sit?
It's a hard look to wear. Isn't it? Just thinking, you know, in terms of the fact that it is so much about the body as well.
Yeah, I find it a bit less tough than previous seasons because the girls look so naked in it, and maybe that's just because it's spring, summer. But at least the girls always had a bit of attitude before, and I know they do in the way they strut and they walk, but they look a bit more like objects than they usually do.
It's looking like the extras from Forrest Gump, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? And I don't mean that in a bad way, because Jenny is like my number one fashion icon.
She is,
but it is really looking at that.
It's just really hard to do it without it seeming like pastiche.
Yeah. But it's obviously working because it's like he hams it up so much, like. You know, the scarves, the hats, it's almost like that saying, you know, like, oh, put on all your accessories and take off one. He always adds one. It's like, it would be ridiculous. Like, number 10 would be ridiculous without the hat and without the belt, but he puts on the hat and the belt and the big fluffy like pin thing that she's got with all the sequins and the teeny bag.
You know, I just think there are a lot of girls that want to look like this girl.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Do you think it is nostalgia? Because I've asked about this on quite a few panels because I'm a bit obsessed with nostalgia, but I feel like there's a real kind of like feeling, a real mood of wanting a return to kind of like be at the 70s or the 90s. You know, you see it so much in what's posted on things like Instagram and Tumblr. And I was intrigued by what you said also sometimes about a shopper who wanted to be that girl when she was younger. Do you think there is an element of kind of nostalgia to buying into, oh, I couldn't be that when I was 20, but I have the money now, so I can do it? What's fueling that kind of obsession with the 90s and the kind of that and the 70s and that?
I mean, I think it was with the 70s, you know, I think it was quite a sort of optimistic time. You know, you think there's so much pressure on everybody right now for all sorts of reasons, that actually there's something really appealing about going back to a time when apparently it just felt more carefree. You know, you just, you know, not only did you look more youthful, but actually the clothes you wore, it was all about, you know, just sort of chilling out.
It's
and
that sweet spot, isn't it, between the pill and the onset of age. And you know, people did live a different, they had a different attitude to life and relationships and what they were going to be when they grew up. And, you know.
So I think
kind of like more, a simplicity.
I think it's more than, you know, just about the you know, the way you might feel. You know, it's about a different time.
However, I'd also say this is about people that don't even know what the 70s really is. And they've never experienced
about the sort of hippie. I think
they
know the best and the glam.
It's a whole different thing. There's a hyper reality to it. I think that it's being totally.
It's like culture through an Instagram filter. I think you really see that, and I love them. But you see with Marcus Almeida, you know, it's the 90s through an Instagram filter, and it's great, and I love it, and I want it all. But it is like, that wasn't the 90s, but it's their version of the 90s through Days and ID.
Yeah, but that's exactly. It's the 90s through those publications, but also it's the 90s if you weren't a pubescent teenager, you weren't struggling with your GCSEs, you didn't have a massive zit the night of the school dance. It's like it's rose tinted. This is rose tinted.
It's a bit like glam rock in that that's when I look at this, I sort of can't help but think, Mark Bolan and all of the, and so.
But they don't know who Mark Bolan is, so this just looks really fresh and new.
I think there's definitely
or they've seen like a picture on Instagram, and they don't really know what it is, but they like that kind of reference. And you think people curate their lives so much. It's like you can. If you have a spot the night of the school prom, you like edit it out in your Instagram photo, and I think people are used to kind of making their lives very image focused, and life doesn't have that much authenticity anymore, like fashion aside, just in the way that people live. So I guess something like this, where it's a real pastiche but really hammed up, it feels really right and really relevant when you are kind of living your life in this very kind of best bits way anyway.
Or apparently best bits.
Exactly, like you're never going to post on Facebook like
that's it.
Yeah, I look disgusting today, and like.
So I have a business idea. I'm putting it out here. Anyone that wants to approach me, come on. I want to build something called Flipstagram. It's the dark side of life. Shit meals, terrible hotel rooms, really bad weather. The day after a breakup, last day of Paris Fashion Week, and that's all you see. And it brings, a side of reality, the yin to the yang.
The shit meals would be really good because everything's like brunch. And if you were like beans,
avocados,
super noodle.
Exactly. Instead of definitely getting food poisoning. You should do it on Grazia
for a week. You should get all your team to post like real Instagram. Every time they like wouldn't want to Instagram something, they have to Instagram something.
Exactly.
It'd be quite interesting.
It would be the reaction. Here we go. Next project. I'll pitch it tomorrow.
Yeah, do. I think it'll go down really well. We've kind of said, a lot of this feels familiar, but is there anything that's striking us and we go, that does feel like a departure for him, that feels new? It's fine if there's not. I think maybe that's his thing.
I don't know, as you were saying, the amount of colour here, obviously we've seen a lot of black and a lot of only very smoky tones, and there's real saturation and a lot of colour clashing.
But you saw that at the women's looks that were on the men's runway that we just saw that. There was actually this beautiful lilac dress. So
But it's that wearing primaries together, I think, is quite strong, and the saturation of all that stuff. Obviously, then you've still got an amazing smoking.
It's interesting how they've styled it, haven't they? Because it feels like if you'd spread the colour pieces, they really wouldn't have had much impact, but they've really done it so like full on black, lots of looks
really
together. But maybe that goes back to this idea of looks that will come to symbolise the collection, that maybe don't sum up the collection. If you were doing a piece about primaries, you could put Saint Laurent show imagery in there.
It feels as though the predominant colour is black, doesn't it? Really, more than
But also because
these obviously Cara's picture, that's going to go everywhere. The patchwork suede jacket.
But they've got a total look policy, so it's kind of
that's how it's all going to be shot.
It's quite it's calculated.
I like look one. I feel like that has something. It's like I love the kind of bad print. Looks like it's the inside of a caravan, like the bad hat. It's kind of good. But then it just becomes a bit normal.
I'm gonna disagree.
You're not a fan.
I don't know, I think you can rock that purple hat.
Yeah, I'm going to make it something.
Really?
I'm sure he'll send it to me.
Yeah, next
time.
I am
of the brand. So are we kind of as apathetic towards Saint Laurent as you kind of have to be?
I don't think I could ever say that I'm apathetic towards it, because I have to be honest, there are things that I would love to own, and there are lots of pieces in here that would seamlessly fit into my wardrobe. I'd love that, so I can't say that.
But they're probably ripped off of something that you already have.
They're probably, or something that I dreamed and wished and an idea that I had or saw once when I was 14 and couldn't afford. Like, it definitely plays to something on my heartstrings for sure. So I can't ever say that I would be apathetic to it. It's just, sometimes you wish there was a bit more.
Yeah. But it's interesting that you approach it from a shopping perspective, not from a fashion. Do you know what I mean?
Well, there are two sides of it, aren't there? You're looking at, as a woman, you're looking at it in a cerebral sense, and I mean, I do think there is that connection. If you can identify yourself with that woman, you're always going to be in some way swayed to being like, it's a bit the same, but I still like it.
Yeah. Are you the same with it, Rebecca? Do you look at it a little bit and be like, oh, I would quite like to wear that, even if it's not kind of moving mountains in your head?
No. The things that I would wear is like, the smoking, and it's, that's nothing new. I wouldn't say, oh, I have to have it because he's done it.
Yeah.
It's just not me. But that's not to say it's good or bad. It's just not something I would aspire to.
And is it ever something you think about? Because I think as fashion journalists, there are collections that play on your mind and you ponder them and they get you thinking about the season.
No. It doesn't occupy much space in my head. But also, it doesn't rile
collections
me.
At all, or just this one?
This one.
This one, yeah.
She's like collections at all. I'm actually not that into fashion.
But it doesn't rile me. It doesn't make me angry.
It's just kind
it
of
just doesn't affect me.
Agnostic.
I think it's for someone. I don't think it's for necessarily an independent reader, and I don't think it's necessarily for me.
Yeah. Do you agree? It's kind
I totally agree. I mean, it's not something that, but I find it quite interesting to go into the shop sometimes and just have a look at what's there and sort of wonder who buys it. Because I do, although I understand the look, nevertheless I do sometimes
and see how they style it.
How do they do they go in and buy the complete?
Do you ever flick through the Saint Laurent hashtag on Instagram? I do that sometimes. I did it before. I didn't actually do it before this season's panel, but I think I did it last season, and see how they wear it, and that's quite interesting because often what I find really weird is people will style it with pieces that look exactly like Saint Laurent that aren't Saint Laurent. So it'll be like a sheer shirt with Zara skinny jeans and a hat, and that's what's really weird is they are kind of styling for it.
Or you see it styled very Harrods. And that definitely happens as well because obviously a Saint Laurent jacket is a statement piece in the same way as a pair of rock studs or whatever, it's that kind of thing.
Yeah, you do see that like a sequin jacket with a little Hervé Leger cocktail jacket and you're like, oh, okay.
But that in
his it's right up his street. Well, shall we... I don't really think it deserves that round of applause. Should we just give it a kind of apathetic nod to round things off? Thanks, guys.
I feel like I need to clap something.
Should we clap it?
Yeah.